We're live. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clayton, will you please call the roll?
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Here.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Chairman Beitman.
Here. Okay, we're all here and accounted for. First item up for business for us today is House Bill 9, Fuel Tax Licensee Information Deadline. It was sponsored by the Joint Transportation Committee. Is there anybody here that wishes to walk us through the bill here? Tell us all about it. Welcome to Senate Revenue, and please introduce yourself to the committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Dennis Byrne. I'm the CFO with WYDOT. To my left, Wayne Hassinger and Kim Peters. They run the fuel tax administration program for the Department of Transportation. Mr. Chairman, just a little brief background here real quick on how this bill came to us. We had been asked by the industry to consider extending the time that we give them to submit their records to WYDOT for consideration and for some of the reviews that we're doing. In statute currently, it's 10 calendar days. Through discussions with industry, we came to an agreement that 15 business days would work, or 15 business days would work well, especially considering around the holidays when people aren't really around the office as much as they need to be in terms of the private individuals submitting some of the tax returns to WYDOT. So, Mr. Chairman, just very quickly, what this bill does, and there's changes on page 2, lines 9 through 15, page 3, lines 6 through 12, and page 4, lines 3 through 9. And really all that does is extend the time that they can submit information to us from 10 calendar days to 15 business days, Mr. Chairman. So we see no issues with going to the 15 business days, and we are fine with this bill. I'm not sure if Kim or Wayne would like to add anything, but if you have any questions, they are certainly here to answer any of those questions for you.
Ms. Byrne, is there any questions? I would ask, just because we'll probably get asked on the floor, sections 107, 207, and 307, what do those sections entail? I'm assuming they're...
Mr. Chairman, Kimberly Peters. They entail the gasoline article, the undyed diesel article, and the alternative fuels article.
Got it. Okay. So gasoline is 107. I'm assuming diesel is 207.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
And then alternative would be 307. Okay, got it. Thank you. Committee, any more questions for the department? Seeing none?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was easy. Thank you. Anybody else want to testify on House Bill 9? If so, please make your way up. Okay, not seeing anybody. Clayton, looks like, do we have somebody on Zoom? Can you go ahead and let them in? Welcome to Senate Revenue. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my name is Dallas Scholes, and I'm Director of Government and Public Affairs for Par Pacific Holdings Incorporated. It's a growing energy company focused on providing conventional and renewable fuels to communities in the Western United States. Our portfolio includes the Wyoming refinery in Newcastle, which, according to Governor Gordon's 2022 gas and diesel price working group, is the only refinery in the region that markets some of its 18,000 barrels per day capacity to Wyoming and local markets in South Dakota. One of the refinery's largest customers is Ellsworth Air Force Base near Rapid City. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 9. The bill, as was mentioned, was developed in conjunction and complete coordination with the Wyoming Department of Transportation's Fuel Tax Administration. And I would note that their understanding and willingness to work with us from the very start has been greatly appreciated. The issue came to me by my director of tax, who's concerned about the limited time. As was explained, 10 calendar days is not forgiving, especially when you have a small staff and you've got so many other things coming at you. Many of the requests for information are for very complex and labor-intense issues. It's important to note that the agency has been acting well within its authority to make the requests, as it owes Wyoming taxpayers a duty to get the numbers right and to track the taxes on the fuel. At the same time, we as industry have been doing all we can to comply with the 10-day window. However, the strict penalties for noncompliance and the lack of compromise built into the statute has created the potential for a perfect storm of frustration for our accountants and stress on both sides. When I presented the situation to CFO Dennis Byrne, he and his staff, Wayne Hassinger and Kim Peters, were most accommodating. They were very protective of their need to get their reports and get everything done in a timely manner, but were understanding of the situation we found ourselves in. We agreed that the compromise of 15 business days would allow us the time we needed to respond without causing a significant backlog at the agency. Mr. Chairman, Par Pacific fully supports the compromise and requests full passage of the bill. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scholes. Any questions? Committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony today. Okay, committee, before we close public comment, Department of Revenue, does this affect you guys in any way? Seeing shaking heads, no, okay. No impact to the Department of Revenue. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Pappas.
Second.
Seconded by French. Discussion?
Like a good bill.
Good little bill. Question being called. Clayton, call the roll, please.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Chairman Beitman.
Aye.
That is 5 ayes and 0 noes.
Thank you. All right, next up is House Bill 197 engrossed. Representative Harshman, welcome to Senate Revenue. This looks a little awful familiar, this bill here. Tell us what's going on with this. Looks like a good little revenue bill we once had.
Exactly. Good morning,
Good morning.
Chairman, members of the
afternoon.
committee. Good to see you again. Okay, Mr. Chairman, this bill was a joint bill that we all voted on and passed. And when the good chairman and I were dividing up bills in the House and Senate files, and as we all know, any bill that raises a tax has to begin in the House. I don't think any of us knew it, but this bill had a streaming tax in it. I don't think we caught it, or if we did, we didn't, I don't know. Anyway, that came up on the, so to let you all know, the chairman and I had these conversations with staff. We said, well, we'll start it in the House and we'll try to take that out. So introduction of the bill in my 30 seconds or whatever, minute, I said, pointed to this has a tax, has a fiscal note of 5 million. And it was streaming, you know, you go down and rent a movie, you have to pay tax, but if you stream, you don't. Well, the point of this bill was not to change tax policy. That's a bigger debate on services and all those things. And so I urge my friends in the House, Boy Scouts honor, pass this thing, and that'll be the First Amendment. We'll take that out of there. Whack, it went down like 61-1. I think I voted for it. But anyway, and so I go, okay, I walked right around the House and I just asked for a new bill draft without that in it. And this is House Bill 197. So doesn't even have a Senate co-sponsor on it. I was thinking it'd be a House revenue sponsored bill, but it was so fast, it's click, click, click. And by the time I submitted it, I just had to, those were the ones who responded. So that's it. And I'd be happy to take for the bill. That's the history.
Sure. That makes sense, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Committee, any questions for Chairman Harshman? Yeah, can you walk us through the bill or
Sure.
just so we can?
And I was working off, and I've just got the engrossed copy, but Mr. Chairman, so as you flip over to page 2 of the engrossed copy, lines 12 through 15, you can see the new language. That is just clarifying language that we decided is brought to us of a vendor to make sure that things that are not done on a regular activity, and you can see that on line 15, like lemonade stands, garage sales. We're not gonna collect sales tax on those, makes it crystal clear. So that's really that one. Then you flip over to page 3, lines 4 through 8. This is free admission, right? So you can read the lines we're striking out, that any person who gets free admission, we're not gonna charge them sales tax. So we're removing that out of there, because that's a pain, right? And then at the bottom of page 3 of the engrossed, the language on line 20 that's stricken and 21 that's added is to make sure that it's not quite crystal clear that the power or fuel that is used to transport the personal property on a railroad pipeline, as it is the motive power, will not be taxed. Right now, that is not crystal clear and it needs to be cleaned up. So that removes any thoughts on that. And then, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to work off okay, flipping over to page 4 of the engrossed copy on line 13, 14, admission fees to a county or municipal owned recreation facility. Clearing that little item up. And then over to page 5 of the bill, where it's 3915-106, sales tax licenses and permits. Over half of our licenses are out of state. 28,000 some licenses out of state. And I think it's unclear in our statute who has to actually apply for a license. Most of these 28,000 never sell anything and never collect any tax to remit back to us. So that basically takes that language out, that cleans that up. And then also it adds to that later about where they're from, I believe, and that goes over to page 7 on lines 14 and 15, just a owner's driver's license or other government identification. So that's that part on 7. And then if you go to the bottom of 7, this is the remittance for the retailers who actually collect the tax, get paid, reimbursed by the state for their effort to collect this tax. There's been kind of a sliding scale in the past. This just makes this easier, an easier one threshold thing for vendors to meet. Okay, and then Mr. Chairman, flipping over to I'm on page 8, I think, of the gross copy. So we eliminated that sliding scale over on, and that's part of this, eliminating the sliding scale on that remittance back to the retailers who collect the tax. And then going over to page 9, this is just a cleanup of the audit process. And so make sure that it's within that 90-day period pending the outcome of the audit as far as the refund and the referral. So there's been some, because you can see the existing language, 90 days of receipt. Well, is it 90 days? Does that include the audit process or not? So this makes sure that that is cleared up with the audit process. And then flipping over, I think, Mr. Chairman, to the last page. Let me just. Oh, these are resort districts. Okay. And we have a couple resort districts up in Teton County, and this is the ones who are remitting a lot of this tax, a lot of tax to the state. out of these resort districts are not necessarily residents or residing in that, vendors that are situated in that resort district. They're just outside of it or whatever. So, then you can see that statute has to be cleaned up, so they're still remitting the tax and they're part of that resort district. It's just not physically situated within the district. So that was the other cleanup on that. And I think, Mr. Chairman and members, that's probably it. And certainly the department can clear up any confusion I've created with the explanation of this bill. So thank you.
No, excellent job. Thank you so much. It's all coming back to us from this summer, so. Repealers, looks like we have some repealers in there. Do we know which ones those touch on, or is that a good question for the department?
I think that would be better handled by the department. And, you know, I should have had those notes on all those. And you can see, Mr. Chairman, and they're all in that 3915, and I think most of those I kind of covered. That's where,
Okay,
if you go back through like 39E and so on, but the department could sure clean that up, summarize it better than I could, I think.
sounds good. All right, excellent job, Mr. Chairman. Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you. Yes, hang around if you got time. Department, why don't you head on up? Mr. Fanning, good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to see you as well. I haven't been in front of you yet this year. Brett Fanning, Excise Tax Administrator at the Department of Revenue. So I, again, testified in front of this committee a couple different times on this bill. I will outline some of those repealers that were just mentioned at the end of the bill. So if you go back, Mr. Chairman, to page 11, and the repealer there, there's a couple of them. So the first one, 3915, A, Romanet 8, O, I, and number 2 there. Those are repealers related to our manufacturing exemption. So if you remember, back in previous testimony, there is definitely confusing language with the manufacturing exemption. There's kind of this two-part qualifier. And the first part is you have to be of a certain NAICS code. And then the second part is you have to have purchased tangible personal property that can't be expensed out per federal guidelines. And there's a lot of confusion. And so right now, this bill eliminates those qualifiers because the exemption already says, hey, you've got to make a new piece of tangible personal property to actually get this exemption. So this removes the qualifiers, which right now, our vendors and our manufacturers, it's already confusing for them. And right now, that's why this bill is clarifying it for them that, hey, if you're producing a new piece of tangible personal property, these qualifiers, they're already included in that exemption as is. So just refreshing your memory there, Mr. Chairman. The second part, the B, so on page 11, line 10, there's that B there. If you remember, this is kind of where this bill all started, really back in 2022. And it's related to exemption reports that the Department of Revenue has to provide to this committee or this body, Joint Revenue Committee, each year. I've testified several times that we're providing the legislature unreliable information because we have difficulties in getting responses from a couple of these exemptions. Data centers, broadband equipment, manufacturers, coal gasification. So these are ones we provide it to the legislature as best we can, and it takes an army. There's a variety of different state agencies that are putting together these exemption reports. This one repeals that, and maybe at a later time it's something revisiting, so maybe we can provide you with better information related to those exemptions. Mr. Chairman, the second part of line 10 on page 11, 3915-501, this was a request from the Streamlined Sales Tax Group. So you've got two different pieces that require you to license with the Wyoming Department of Revenue. The first part is, and if you're selling things that have imposition statutes in our statutes. Two qualifiers. You got to be physically located in the state, and that's the one, and that's the vast majority of what we see. Then the second one is, hey, you've got to meet these economic thresholds. Right now in our statutes, it's 100,000 in total sales or 200 separate transactions. The Streamlined Sales Tax Group has said, hey, states are really navigating towards just having one threshold, this $100,000. And so that's where we're at. And the state of South Dakota, who is famous for economic nexus, Supreme Court decisions, they have also gone to the 100,000. We're not aware of any companies that have licensed with us just based on the 200 transactions. Removing that is trying to not require licensing for maybe smaller mom and pops that are more regional players as opposed to large online players. Now, this licensing, this 200,000 economic NEC is completely different than voluntary licensing. These folks are required to license with us. Voluntary licensing, they are not required, and they're doing so for a variety of reasons that are maybe worth another discussion at a later point. So with that, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any other questions, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Chairman Biteman. Just real quick, could you explain that again, the difference between voluntary and involuntary licensing? Thank you.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, absolutely, yes. So here in the state of Wyoming, we have several imposition statutes. And if you do any of those statutes, there are two things that require you to license with us. The first one is you got to be located in our state. So they're going to be in your district, Chairman Biteman's, Chairman Hart's, everyone's district. So that's one thing that requires you to license with us. The second part is if you are not in Wyoming, you're in another state or even across the ocean, you have a licensing requirement with us if you make more than 100,000 in sales or currently right now have 200 or more separate transactions into our state. So those things ultimately require you to come to the department and get a license with us. Now, we do have a provision, and it's in this bill that says, hey, if you don't meet any of those two requirements, you can still license with us. And that comes with consistent reporting requirements. It gives you business legitimacy. It gives you access to an exemption certificate that may or may not be used in Wyoming. And so as the bringer of the bill has mentioned a couple different times, this is creating a workload for a lot of folks who are not sending in a dime of tax to us. Now, yes, there are companies that will voluntarily license with us and could submit tax, but the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of them do not.
Excellent. Mr. Fanning, does that 200 transaction, did that come out of the Wayfair decision, or is that just what the response was to the Wayfair decision? Can you refresh our memory on why South Dakota went with that and we all copied them?
Mr. Chairman, you've got it exactly right. This 200 transactions was not a result of the Wayfair decision. It was what South Dakota had come up with at the time. And then the United States Supreme Court said, hey, state of South Dakota is requiring licensing. And then you had states that kind of piggybacked off of that format because it was successful in the courts.
Okay, gotcha. So we won't get in trouble getting rid of the 200.
Mr. Chairman, no. In fact, the state of South Dakota has already gotten rid of the 200 threshold, along with some other streamlined states as well.
All right. Right on. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any public comment on, what is this? Senate File 197 engrossed. Come on up. Welcome to Senate Revenue. Please introduce yourself to the committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Shane Taylor. I am the administrator of the Excise Tax Division of the Department of Audit. And I just come basically with a question on page 9, when we're dealing with the referrals from the Department of Revenue for Department of Audit for the tolling. The way that's written to me is provided that the referral of a refund request by the Department of Revenue to the Department of Audit shall toll the 90-day period pending the outcome of an audit. Is that saying there when we get a referral that we will conduct the audit, or only if we decide to engage that vendor for an audit will that tolling of the 90 days happen? So I was just looking for some clarification on that. I've had numerous discussions with DOR on that, but it just doesn't really read that to me when I read these lines.
All right, that's a good question. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would you prefer that shall to be may?
Yeah, I think that would be good, or rather than pending the outcome of an audit process, maybe something to the like of pending an audit engagement by the Department of Audit. I just want to mainly know how to administer this in the case that we were to get 10 referrals. It likely won't happen. We have a really good working relationship with the Department of Revenue right now, and we really handle the referrals pretty positively right now. The way it's currently done, it's just this wording is a little off to me.
Okay. Any other questions, committee, clarifications or anything? Understand what we're doing? All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anything else?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, do you have anything to add on that one? No? Okay. Any other public comment? Not seeing a big rush up here. Anybody on Zoom, Clayton? Nobody on Zoom? All right, Chairman, if you don't have anything to add, we'll go ahead and close it down. All right, we'll dispose of this bill. Thank you. Public comments closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
I'll move the bill.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Any amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator McEwen?
I think the only amendment we need is, probably the easiest is just make the shall or may.
Is that a motion?
I move that we amend it.
You want to discuss it first and then
Yeah.
make the motion?
Could we discuss it first?
Senator Pappas?
Mr. Chairman, I think I heard Mr. Taylor say he'd prefer the second alternative, where instead of leave it shall, but then on line 14, be pending an audit engagement of the Department of Audit. I think they prefer that. I don't know. Would we need both? Would we need both?
Mr. Taylor, could you come back up to the microphone, please?
Maybe we need both.
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, I think we could use both, having the may and then also add the language pending the engagement of an audit by the Department of Audit. Because that's typically what we'll do now. If they would give us a referral, we'll go and review it and determine through our own risk assessment and other models whether we want to perform the audit in that case and do a full audit of the company rather than just the refund lines that they submit to the Department of Revenue. And in some cases, we don't audit probably all of the refund requests the Department of Revenue is getting because they're getting a lot more than they send over to us.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Taylor before we let him go back? Do you have what you need for a possible amendment? We do both of you? Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Department of Revenue, do you have any comments on this proposed idea? A possible amendment? Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So just quick background here on kind of how this all works. So you've really got two separate agencies that partner together, but they're separate and independent agencies here. So what will generally happen is the Department of Revenue gets a refund request every single day. And those requests can range from a few dollars to millions of dollars. And so there are times when some of these refund requests maybe it'll require a little more expertise, a little more time commitment. Maybe they require a full-scale audit. So that is when we will correspond with the Department of Audit and say, hey, this is something that you may want to take a look at. And so the Department of Audit, as their own independent agency, they can make the decision, yes, we want to take that audit, or no, we don't. And so if they say yes, that was what this original language was meant to. Hey, if they say yes, they're going to do a full-scale audit, then it tolls that statute of 90 days until that audit process is complete. Because then they've got a full picture of the liability for that taxpayer over the past 3 years. Now, if the Department of Audit says, no, we're not going to do this refund, and they have a variety of valid reasons, Mr. Taylor just acknowledged that, then the Department of Revenue will take on this and make sure the taxpayer gets their refund back or not within 90 days. If we decide to deny a refund, then the taxpayer does have an avenue to appeal it to the State Board of Equalization. So this language, as we've testified before, was just meant to clean up that language and protect our customers. The language that Mr. Taylor has put in there, the department has no such issues. Yes, it clarifies it. If there is an audit engagement, then this does toll the statute of limitations. That's what we're ultimately, or the bill was ultimately trying to consider.
Okay. So yeah, you're okay with this?
Mr. Chairman, I think so.
right.
Yes. And again, it was just on the spot. I think so. Talking with Director Henson, I think we can, again, it's meant to protect the customer if they're due a valid refund.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fanning. Any questions for Mr. Fanning? Go back. Yes? Oh, okay. All right. All right, committee, now back to you guys here. Senator McEwen, you're fixing to make a motion. Why don't you go ahead and make that motion?
I move that we do an amendment. We change the shall till May, and following pending an audit engagement by the audit department. Replace those words. By the Department of Audit.
Moved and seconded. Clayton, did you get that?
Just to clarify the amendment, so the amended language would read, starting with line 12 on page 9, refund request by the Department of Revenue to the Department of Audit may toll the 90-day period pending an audit engagement by the Department of Audit.
And then delete the outcome of the audit process? Or leave that in there, because that doesn't sound right. So you would have to delete that.
So that would be
Okay,
to strike the language following the word pending and then replace it with a.
okay. Clear enough? Discussion? Question being called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The amendment's been adopted. Any other amendments, committee? Question being called. Clayton, please call the roll.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Chairman Beitman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 5 ayes and 0 noes.
Thank you, Clayton. Committee, that clears the desk. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting. Right now, we don't have any more House bills, so we may or may not be meeting on Thursday, but Clayton will keep us up to date as to what's being assigned to our committee, and we may have a bill or two on Thursday. With that, this meeting's been adjourned. Thank you.